I grew up in this part of the world, and I think of myself as having grown up in a triangular trade between the United States, Norway, and Brazil, and that reflects a family history in the shipping business, which combined those three areas, and I would say I was very fortunate to have that as my background, because they in so many ways opened up not only the freedom and stability of a country like the United States, but the heritage, particularly when it comes to shipping, of a country like Norway, and then the very early introduction to what I would call the emerging world by my experience in Brazil.
The next generation, let's say, of shipping, what advice would you give them? What have you learned along the way, or what mistakes have you seen your peers make? What would you have them avoid?
Well, I would certainly emphasize the importance of developing a broad view of shipping. If you look back at those that have been able to survive generations in this business, it's been groups that have defined shipping in broad terms, defined shipping in the terms as trade, as participants in logistics, in service providers, and have not specifically seen themselves as, quote, ship owners. I have an enormous respect for what I call the physicality of ships. It's true of all the transportation sectors. I mean, to really enjoy this business, you'd be missing out a lot if you didn't appreciate the physicality, the trucks and trains and planes. And that's why that period that I had outside the shipping business was so critical, because I think it does give you perspective. That those of us that came into this business had our first taste of it in the 70s. The rocky ground that we see today is what we learned to walk on. A sailor would say, this is the weather we learned to sail in. And I don't mean it gratuitously or I mean only with due respect for people that are in difficult situations today. But those of us that came in then, it was in many ways easier, because it's certainly easier to learn the business. I mean, I wouldn't regret, and I wouldn't take that timing away for anything, because things were clear. That's the point I'm trying to think. Things were clear. It was to survive, you had to be a low-cost producer, low-cost service provider. You had to provide the lowest cost per ton carried, unit moved, and you had to get there the fastest. It was, today they call it logistics, but then it was really very simple. It was very clear. We were very focused on the supply of ships in each sector, and we were also very clear in trying to keep track of you keep coming back to the timing. What was the cyclical recovery, and what was cyclical overcapacity, and what I like to call structural overcapacity. Trade actually, when you look at the beginning of the 80s, towards the middle of the 80s, trade was actually picking up, but rates were not, because there was fundamental structural overcapacity. These little nuances we really lived through, and we got to understand. Someone who came in, the last 10, 15 years, I mean, really they're very lost, because it was hard to figure out what were the fundamentals of this business when it got so exaggerated. So anyone that has the opportunity to come into this business now, I'm thinking particularly of younger people, this is a gift, because they'll get the same gift that we got. They'll get to see the business when it's very, very black and white.